We're going to focus on UFC 199, which is tonight, live on pay-per-view. Not one, but two title fights. Middleweight championship on the line, as well as the bantamweight title on the line, in two fights that have a lot of emotion going into it. And we're going to bring up a buddy of mine. He's one of the top MMA insiders. You can follow him at Talk MMA. In fact, he is so infamous. His name is Dizz. And there's a whole story behind that, but we'll get into that today. But my friend, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on. What's going on, Josh? Heard you talking about some baseball there earlier. It was kind of nice to hear you getting some callers chiming in on you.
Well, you know, where you live, there's no baseball. We won't talk about where you live, but there's no baseball team. I was actually surprised to hear you say that.
Where I live at, we have the benefit of picking the team we want, and I chose the Chicago Cubs when I was a child. So I was a Cubs fan back in the days of Ryan Sandberg, Andre Dawson, Sean Dunston.
Oh, wow.
Those were my boys.
Rick Sutcliffe.
Yes.
Nice. All right, let's talk about these fights tonight. All right, so I texted you yesterday, full disclosure, and asked you what on earth did Bisping say to Luke Rockhold at the weigh-in? Because I'm horrible at reading lips. These two have been feuding back and forth in the media for a while now. So were you able to figure out what he said to him that got those two all riled up?
Yeah, he did. He told him that he couldn't wait to knock that smug look off your MFing face. Is basically what he said to him. Yeah, he repeated himself once he got the mic, so it wasn't anything different than what he said.
Okay.
Than what he said on the mic. So no surprises. He said what he said. And Bisping does have a tendency to repeat himself in the heat of the moment. So that's just kind of how he gets hyped for a fight.
All right, so let's do a little background on this. Michael Bisping, he has the most fights at middleweight in the UFC with 13. He's 18-7 in the UFC, and he's fighting Luke Rockhold, the former Strikeforce middleweight champion. Rockhold was supposed to fight Chris Weidman. Weidman gets injured. According to the stories, they were calling Jacare Souza. Souza said he was injured. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. And Bisping apparently got a call, walked off of the Triple X2 movie set, and said, "I'll fight on 2 weeks' notice."
Yeah, he did. In fact, he got the phone call, said, "Yes, I'll do it," and then went back to filming. And then went back to training. So, yeah, he tends to stay a little bit busy. He was, how could you – this was a golden opportunity to finally get Michael Bisping into a title shot. He was on a 3-fight win streak, so you really can't argue with it. He did just beat Anderson Silva. He split decision Talis, who's, he's pretty decent on the ground. And that was just almost actually coming up on a year ago. So he is on a 3-fight win streak. I think the Anderson Silva fight, if it wasn't for that fight, it'd have been a little bit difficult to call. But, he's only one of two people who's actually beaten Anderson Silva in the UFC. So,
do you think over the years that he has had chances to be a number one contender before Bisping? Do you think it's a situation where it was just wrong place, wrong time? He wasn't equipped for a title shot before? What do you think was the problem in years past?
I think he's come across some killers. I mean, there's literally. I mean, Belfort back in the day, when he lost to Belfort, that was pre-USADA. Now that USADA's in the mix, Belfort looks quite different.
Right.
He fought Chael Sonnen, which a lot of people, I got to be honest here, a lot of people, including Chael, thought Bisping won that fight. And at Tim Kennedy, it's so tough to beat Tim Kennedy when he grinds you out the way he does. He's so strong. And, it's hard to get out from under. And he's good. And that tells you how good Tim Kennedy is about grinding you out when Michael Bisping, somebody who's good about getting back up to his feet, can't get out from underneath of Tim Kennedy. And then, the Rockhold head kick, submission guillotine choke back in, November of 2014.
Right.
And so here we are, three fight win streak later. You've got Michael Bisping who I got, apparently it makes sense. Jacare Souza, he went out with, I guess he had to have a minor knee surgery. And like you said, nobody knows really the severity of if he really did have to have it. But Jacare was in shape still, so I really doubt that he would pass that up if he didn't have to. For all we know, he could be sitting on his couch right now going, Jesus, that could have been me.
Luke Rockhold, he was supposed to fight Chris Weidman. For those who don't know Luke Rockhold, all that most people know really is that he fought in Strikeforce and that he beat Chris Weidman. So can you give a little bit of information for folks out there about Luke Rockhold?
Well, Luke Rockhold, the guy's only lost twice his entire life. He lost his second professional fight, and then his third professional fight, he was in Strikeforce. And he went, he debuted in Strikeforce back in 2008. I could go through the list of names of guys he's beaten, and most, common or casual mixed martial arts fans will say, not sure who that is.
Right.
But once you start getting up to 7-1, he fought, Jacare, beat him by decision, and that was a close fight. A lot of people thought Jacare won. So it was kind of a split field here. He beats Keith Jardine, and that was at middleweight, and at that time he was the champion. Another fight that people thought maybe they weren't for sure if he won. He fought Tim Kennedy. Then he debuts Strikeforce. They debunked, and then he makes his debut into the UFC, getting spin kicked by Vitor Belfort.
Right.
And like I said, and to Rockhold's credit, that was pre-USADA day. Since then, though, he's not faced an opponent he hasn't finished since then. He's on a 5-fight win streak, including, winning the middleweight championship. He's had 2 TKOs and 3 submissions over Lyoto Machida, Bisping, Bosch, Weidman. The Weidman fight, I think, could have probably been stopped at the end of the third round rather than, sending Chris Weidman to inevitably get, his head bashed in for most of round 4. But it's scary. He's only gotten better over time. So
we're talking with Dizz. You can follow him at Talk MMA, one of the top MMA insiders, at Talk MMA on Twitter. UFC 199 tonight, Bisping, Rockhold 2, and then you have one of the more visceral trilogies in MMA. I think the only one that kind of compares with the amount of talking and the amount of yip yap is Chuck Liddell and Tito Ortiz years ago. Uriah Faber and Dominic Cruz is something that's been going on for almost a decade now. These guys don't just not like each other. They say things about each other that respectable people shouldn't really say about each other. So, give folks a real quick recap. We know Faber beat Cruz in the first fight. Cruz won the second fight. But this is an older Uriah Faber. This is a fresh Cruz with riding a lot of confidence. What can we expect to see from this fight tonight?
I don't think you're going to see anything different than the Dillashaw fight, except not as close. There is a chance, Uriah Faber has a lot of speed at 135, and there is a chance that he could perhaps clip and if he just happens to be able to touch Dominic Cruz. Dominic Cruz is hit less than any bantamweight in the UFC history, or I dare say MMA history. Like, he's barely touched. He rarely comes out with a scratch on him. And a lot of that is his footwork. He has superior footwork. And it is something I preach constantly when I'm on Twitter. I do not know why some of these fighters keep their heads on center line. It's constant. They're okay with their head movement for the first half of the first round, and then their head movement just disappears for the rest of the fight. Not Dominic Cruz. Dominic Cruz's head is consistently moving. It's like, it's like trying to spear it's like trying to spear a school of fish, and they're all going to move. They're all going to, they see that spear coming, they all move, bang. It's like, okay, forget that. I'm not, it's hard to hit him. And that's going to be a big problem. If Uriah Faber doesn't do something significant in round 1, you already know the story for rounds, 2 through 5. It's not even going to be close. Uriah always says he has something up his sleeve, but it's so interesting, too, this rivalry as well, because these guys are like, they don't even hate each other. Both of them have said that they don't even really hate each other, but they don't like each other. There's a big difference between I like that person and I don't like them and I hate them.
Yeah, but I think it's some of that semantics, though, because, I mean, come on. I mean, the things they say about each other at press conferences to each other's faces is pretty down and dirty.
For a lot of part, yeah. I think Cruz is mostly speaking off of facts, and I think that Faber is still living in 2007 off that guillotine choke that he was able to get. I think he's still living back in 2007 on that. But you know what they remind me of? They remind me of the older brother and younger brother squabbling in the backyard. They really do. It's like the younger brother who's always trying to win the approval of the older brother. And that's what Uriah Faber reminds me of. He reminds me of the younger brother. I know I've got two of them.
Real quick before we move on, a story that does not have to do with UFC 199. UFC 199 tonight on pay-per-view. We've been talking with Dizz from @TalkMMA. You can follow him on Twitter. Ronda Rousey is all of a sudden getting knee surgery. She's basically been AWOL for months now. She hasn't really showed up for UFC fights. She hasn't really been in the public as often as you think a celebrity like her would be. Apparently she's been quote-unquote busy filming movies and hanging out with her boyfriend, Travis Brown. But now all of a sudden she needs knee surgery, according to Dana White. He announced this yesterday on ESPN Sports Nation. And now now she might not be back until December. So where on earth did this come from?
I have no idea. I don't think Ronda gives me this impression that they wanted to rush her back for UFC 200. And then they say, okay, if not for 200, can you do Madison Square Garden later in the year? I think they just keep trying to rush her back, and I think this was her being smart. And she has to beat Holly Holm. Her comeback has to beat Holly Holm. It has to be. I said this a long time ago. Ronda Rousey has the best style to beat Miesha Tate, who has the best style to beat Holly Holm, who has the best style to beat Ronda Rousey. It's a cute little triangle, but it's true.
Yeah.
Styles make matchups, and this is. I think that she got some stuff she knows she needs to work on. I made a comment yesterday. I think that instead of just standing there, she should go to Alliance and hang out with Dominic Cruz for about 6 months and see how, maybe teach her some footwork and some head movement.
Real quick, it's funny you mention that because, a lot of people, including her mother, Ronda's own mother, have said that she needs to leave where she's been training and go somewhere else, but she insists on staying, and it's almost like she's got some kind of sort of complex.
She's loyal to a fault, and I know that. I can identify with that because I have the same issue, but she is absolutely loyal to a fault. It's almost kind of like a separation complex, to be honest with you. She's with a bunch of people. She's
right, exactly,
with her for a few years, but she does kind of give me that fear of something new complex, jumping in. But what if and now especially since Holly, knocked her head off, it kind of makes me feel like she's in this area where I don't know if I try something new, is that even going to work? Let me just stick to what I know right now. But I don't think it would be a bad thing for her to go actually train with somebody who isn't just going to run her through the basics, because that's all Edmund Tavernian is, in my opinion. He's just a basic boxing coach. He just little things here and there, fundamentals, which everybody needs fundamentals. But when you get this high up in competition, you have to go beyond fundamentals, and you have to make your game plans a little bit more complex. Skill sets have to be a little bit more broadened, and you got to be ready for. You got to be ready for the unthinkable.
All right, real quick, I got to go to break in a minute here, but give me your picks for tonight.
My picks for tonight, looking down the list, I like Rockhold. I like Cruz. I like Ricardo Lamas because people forget he only lost to Jose Aldo.
Mm-hmm.
And Chad Mendez, who at the time were number 1 and 2. Hector Lombard, Dan Henderson's an underdog, but there's just something that every time Dan Henderson's been an underdog, somehow he just happens to just shine through. I'm going to go. Okay, let's just say it this way: I'm going to pick Hector Lombard to win, but I'm placing a bet on Dan Henderson.
Okay. Cover all your bases.
Yeah, sure, why not? Dustin Poirier and Bobby Green. Bobby Green's tricky. Dustin Poirier, if he puts his hands on you, I think Bobby Green's gonna be on Dream Street.
And that main card is tonight, UFC 199 on pay-per-view. Diz, appreciate you joining me here on the Sports Bash Saturday, and I'll catch you on the other side.
Hey, catch you soon. Thanks for having me on.